Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing about cardiac abnormalities in high altitude. My moderator is Dr. Raghav Sharma. The traveling options currently available allow an increasingly large number of individuals, including sedentary people, the elderly, and the diseased people, to reach high altitude locations. And these are defined by locations which are more than 2,500 meters above sea level. Changes in the physiological function during high altitude exposure vary with an individual's physical fitness, the rate of ascent, severity and duration of exposure, cultural habits, geographic locations, and genetic variation. While high altitude is well tolerated by most individuals, patients with cardiovascular disease are at a risk of complications caused by tissue hypoxia and reduced oxygen delivery, sympathetic stimulation, increased myocardial demand, paradoxical vasoconstriction, and alteration in hemodynamics that occur with exposure to high altitude. An understanding of barometric pressure, which is the primary determinant of partial pressure of oxygen in inspired air, is essential to understanding the cardiovascular stress of high altitude. It is given by the formula PiO2 is equal to FiO2 into barometric pressure. PiO2 is the partial pressure of oxygen in inspired air, and FiO2 is a fraction of inspired oxygen, which is same at all altitudes. As the barometric pressure changes, the FiO2 remains constant while the partial pressure of oxygen is altered with the change in barometric pressure. Specifically, the partial pressure of arterial oxygen decreases with altitude, which can be seen in this image. There are few factors which contribute to reduction in the barometric pressure and can increase in the physiological consequence of altitude, which include the decrease in temperature, deteriorating weather, and latitude. Coming to the cardiovascular responses to high altitude, there are several circulatory changes that occur within minutes to hours of exposure to high altitude, which include increase in heart rate, increase in stroke volume, increase in cardiac output, and increasing blood pressure, and changes in blood flow, that is, blood is shunted away from major organs such as kidney, liver, stomach, and intestine, and there is an increase in the difference of oxygen content of arterial and venous blood. The series of physiological responses to acute hypoxia can be showcased in this image. There is activation of peripheral chemoreceptors which cause sympathetic activation, thereby increasing blood pressure, increasing heart rate, and increasing cardiac output. And there is also increase in ventilation which causes respiratory alkalosis. There is also pulmonary vasoconstriction which in turn causes pulmonary hypertension. Despite these effects, there is ultimately a lower peak cardiac output at high altitudes as opposed to at sea level. Such limitations are autonomic responses to limit the myocardial oxygen demand and consumption during times of reduced oxygen availability. Over 1 to 2 weeks' time, the stroke volume is decreased from reduced payload and a lowered plasma volume from respiratory, urinary, and cutaneous losses. And there are a few ECG changes which occurs at this high altitude. These include increase in resting heart rate, prolongation of QT interval, ST wave flattening, a rightward shift in the frontal QRS axis, increasing P wave amplitude in lead 2. And these are few examples. The one on the right shows the person ECG taken at sea level and at 17,500 feet, and as we can see, there is right axis deviation which is seen at high altitude, and the one on the left shows ECG of the same person taken at sea level and at high altitude, and this shows T wave flattening and T wave inversion, as we can see at high altitude. Coming to 2D echo changes, there is a threefold increase in mean pulmonary arterial pressure, altered right and left ventricular diastolic function, prolonged isovolumic relaxation time, maintained right ventricular systolic function, and improved left ventricular systolic function. Coming to the long-term altitude exposure, after 3 to 4 days, the initial sympathetic nervous system manifestation of altitude resolved as early acclimatization begins. There is resetting of the hypoxic ventilatory response to allow increased ventilation at a given hypoxic stimulus, and there is also increase in red blood cell mass mediated by erythropoietin. There is increased tissue capillary density, predominantly in the highly engaged muscular tissues, and there is reduction in the alveolar arterial oxygen gradient and reduced parasympathetic nervous activity as a key mechanism for elevated heart rate in chronic hypoxia. There is also a rightward shift of oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, thereby facilitating oxygen unloading to tissues. The effects of high altitude exposure may have important implications for patients with the various types of heart diseases. In addition to the baseline changes to the cardiovascular system, the possible development of high altitude diseases, which include mountain sickness or pulmonary or cerebral edema, can add further stress to cardiovascular system. And as a result of this, cardiac patients who are engaged in high altitude recreational activities should be warned about the signs of altitude illness. In patients with coronary artery disease, it was seen that exercise at real or stimulated altitude appears to be relatively safe, provided patients take the same precautions as they would at sea level. However, the acute hemodynamic changes associated with altitude or hypoxemia result in an earlier onset of anginal symptoms or ECG symptoms. In a study that compared 23 patients with stable CST and a mean LVF of 39% with control subjects during maximal bicycle ergometer stress testing, both at sea level and at 1000 meters, the following findings were noted. Patients with coronary artery disease who were more often receiving the therapy with a beta blocker and ACE inhibitor had a lower peak rate pressure product than controls at both altitudes, and in both patients and controls, exercise capacity was lower at higher altitude compared with baseline, while the maximum heart rate was same at both baseline and at 2500 meters. And both groups maintained oxygen percent saturation in the low to mid 90s at rest and with exercise at both baseline and altitude. There was no complications such as high grade arrhythmias or provocation of significant ischemia. So in patients with coronary artery disease, patients who had recent acute coronary syndromes who have not had revascularization, there should not be ascent to altitude unless maximal stress testing has been performed, and there is an absence of overt ischemia. And patients who have had an MI within 2 weeks should only undergo air travel, which is a potential stress in itself, if there is no angina, dyspnea or hypoxemia at rest and there is no fear of flying. In addition, they should fly with a companion, carry nitroglycerin and be able to cope with the emotional and physical demands of travel. Patients should also be warned that anginal symptoms will probably occur more easily at a lower workload, and so strenuous activities should be approached with higher degree of caution, particularly during the first 3 or 4 days of altitude. Therefore, acclimatization for at least 5 days is advised. Access to appropriate medicine and medical care should be also confirmed prior to high altitude travel, and there should be optimization of CST medication and discussion regarding the compliance of medication prior to high altitude exposure. Patients with heart failure are especially susceptible to physiological changes from high altitude. The increased sympathetic activity elevates the systemic vascular resistance, blood pressure and heart rate, which results in a reduced exercise capacity. Other factors in patients with chronic heart failure that may predispose them to exacerbation at high altitude include chronically elevated catecholamine levels, increased transcapillary permeability in the lung, poor skeletal muscle metabolism, high oxygen extraction in the periphery, poor pulmonary function and concurrent CHD. Prior to approving exposure to altitude, the following should be assessed for this class of patients: baseline functional capacity, expected altitude that will be encountered, anticipated level and expected duration of the time spent at high altitude, and if a patient exhibits symptoms at rest or during minimal activity or require oxygen therapy at rest, even the stress of air flight may be significant and should be approached with caution. In such patients, oxygen therapy should be considered, and for patients already on oxygen, Increased flow rates can be used to elevate symptoms. By comparison, patients with only mild functional issues at sea level will probably tolerate moderate altitudes, but should be warned that they will become symptomatic at a lesser degree of exercise. In patients with pre-existing valvular disease, the acute hemodynamic changes induced by additional hypoxic stress of altitude may result in decompensation of that condition. The increased myocardial workload and oxygen demand will mean valvular symptoms may acutely worsen, and the increased systemic afterload may increase the regurgitant fraction in both aortic and mitral regurgitation, worsening symptoms. There is increased pulmonary afterload from increased pulmonary vascular resistance, which may exacerbate pulmonary and tricuspid regurgitation, and also dehydration may result in reduced preload and may worsen symptoms of valvular stenosis. Elevated heart rates may increase the gradient across stenotic valves and increase symptoms. And for those with prosthetic mechanical heart valves, the hypercoagulable state induced by acute altitude exposure may increase risk of valvular thrombosis, especially if the anticoagulation level is not at the desired range. And for those who are asymptomatic with mild to moderate valvular disease, exercise testing and transthoracic echo at rest or stress is recommended for evaluating their current status and response to exercise. And for those with symptomatic or severe valvular disease, exposure to altitude is contraindicated. Hypoxic challenge tests such as the hypoxia altitude simulation test may be helpful to obtain more practical information about possible hemodynamic effects and symptoms during high altitude exposure. Education about blood pressure self-monitoring and treatment titration is needed if uncontrolled hypertension or hypotension develops, and for those on anticoagulation, instructions for self-monitoring and dose adjustment should also be given, and alcohol consumption should be avoided or used with caution. The incidence of arrhythmias at altitude is variable and depends upon the patient group under study. There is heightened sympathetic activity associated with high altitude and may increase the frequency and duration of supraventricular and ventricular arrhythmias in patients with underlying heart diseases. A study among young healthy individuals without arrhythmias was conducted in a hypobaric chamber study of 80 healthy men aged 21 to 30, and they were observed during exercise at simulated altitudes up to the equivalent of summit of Mount Everest, that is 8,850 meters, and there was no arrhythmias or conduction defect seen. Examining a more advanced group, a Holter monitor study of healthy middle-aged men found that the incidence of both supraventricular and ventricular premature beats nearly doubled at an altitude of 1,350 meters as compared with 200 meters, and at a higher altitude, the frequency of ectopy was increased to 6 to 7 fold. And patients with a stable CHD, that is 10 older adult patients with exercise-induced ischemic changes at sea level were studied at 2,500 meters, both acutely and after 5 days of acclimatization. Ventricular premature beats were significantly increased with acute exposure, but returned to sea level values after acclimatization. Coming to pacemaker function at high altitude, the issue of pacemaker safety at altitude and possibility of alteration in stimulation thresholds are uncertain since data are conflicting. And in a report, stepwise stimulated hypobaric chamber ascent from 450 to 4,000 meters produced no change in stimulation threshold in spite of a significant fall in partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood. Coming to congenital heart diseases which are seen in high altitude, CHD associated with intracardiac or extracardiac shunts may be associated with the net shunting of blood from left high pressure side to the right low pressure side. However, with exposure to high altitude and hypobaric hypoxia, pulmonary vascular resistance and the right pressures are increased. This results in an increase in right to left shunting, leading to arterial oxygen desaturation. The extent to which arterial oxygen desaturation occurs will depend upon many factors, including the size of the communication, baseline right-sided pressures, and the extent of altitude-induced pulmonary hypertension. It is important to appreciate that there may be an increased prevalence of congenital heart diseases, that is ASD, patent foramen ovale, or patent ductus arteriosus at high altitudes. The take-home message is that high altitude increase cardiovascular risk. The complex genetic, physiological, and clinical results represent a challenge to scientists and physicians. And such knowledge is essential for improving overall cardiovascular disease prevention, separate from the usual clinical and public health problems. Prior cardiac consultation, adherence with medication, and non-invasive cardiac tests in selected cases may prevent major cardiac events. My references are up to date and article which is clinical recommendation for high altitude exposure of individuals with pre-existing cardiovascular conditions published in European Heart Journal. Thank you.